The Dakota winter of 1876 was not a place for widows. It was a white grave, a howling emptiness that swallowed hope and froze the marrow. For Eliza Jane Barlow, survival was a daily war fought with an axe and a stubborn prayer. But that war changed on the day she found the blood. She followed the crimson stain against the snow and found a man, a Lakota warrior, dying. She knew the rules. Touching him was a death sentence. The army would call her a traitor. The settlers, worse. But she couldn't let him die. She dragged him into her cabin, into her world. And for 3 days, she fought the fever, the fear, and the ghosts. On the third morning, they came. Not one, but 50 warriors, their faces painted, their silence more terrifying than any war cry. They surrounded her tiny cabin, and the price for her act of mercy had come due. The silence of the Black Hills in deep winter was a living thing. It was a predator, a crushing weight that pressed down on the flimsy roof of Eliza Jane Barlow's cabin. It was the sound of a world holding its breath, waiting to kill you. Eliza hated the silence. It had been her only companion for 4 months, ever since Jacob. She shook her head, dislodging the memory and a dusting of snow from her hood. Don't think on it, Eliza. Thinking is a luxury. Chop the wood, check the traps, survive. Her words fogged in the air, the temperature a solid 20 degrees below freezing. Her cabin, a single-room square of mud-chinked logs, sat in a small clearing Jacob had carved from the aspens. It was supposed to be their fortress, their dream. Now it was just her prison. She was checking her snare line, her fingers numb inside her thick wool mittens. The traps were empty. Again. The rabbits were smart, or frozen, or eaten by the wolves she heard howling at the blood-red moon last night. Hunger was a cold, dull ache, but fear was a sharper blade. She was running low on everything: flour, salt, and most importantly, nerve. She turned back toward the cabin, her gaze sweeping the endless, undulating sea of white. And she saw it. It was wrong. A disruption in the perfect, terrible landscape. A splash of dark crimson, almost black, against the blinding white of a snowdrift near the creek bed. Her first thought was wolf kill. A deer, perhaps. That would mean fresh meat. A dangerous, exhilarating hope filled her chest. She unslung the heavy Winchester .73 from her shoulder, the rifle that had been Jacob's. The cold metal stung her palm even through the mitten. She moved slowly, her snowshoes whispering, "Shush, shush, shush," on the new powder. As she got closer, the shape became clearer. It wasn't a deer, it was a man. He was face down, half buried, a drift already starting to build over his back. He wore buckskins, and his long black hair was fanned out in the snow, unbound. A single eagle feather was tied into it. Lakota. Eliza froze. Her blood ran colder than the air. This was 1896, the year of Custer, of the Little Bighorn. The year the word Lakota was a curse on the lips of every white person in the Dakota Territory. The soldiers from Fort Laramie had warned the few settlers who hadn't fled. See an Indian, you shoot. Don't ask, just shoot. They'll do the same to you. Her husband, Jacob, had died in a skirmish with a Cheyenne raiding party. They'd found him with 3 arrows in his back. And here she was, staring at one of their cousins. The man in the snow didn't move. He was likely dead, frozen solid. She took a step closer, rifle raised. She could just walk away. Leave him. The snow would finish the job by nightfall. It was the smart thing to do. The safe thing. Then, a small, choked sound. A puff of white vapor, as faint as a dying breath, left his lips. He was alive. "Damn you," Eliza whispered, the oath sharp in the frigid air. "Damn you for not being dead." She stood there for a long minute, her mind at war. Jacob's face, pale and wide-eyed in death, flashed in her memory. She owed this man nothing. He was the enemy. His people had made her a widow. Leaving him was justice. But then she saw the side of his face, turned towards her. He couldn't have been more than 20. His features, though strained in agony, were fine, almost noble. He was just a boy, and he was dying. "I ain't them," she growled to herself, to the silent trees, to the ghost of her husband. "I won't be." The decision, once made, settled on her like a second shroud. She jammed her rifle back onto her shoulder and fell to her knees beside him. She rolled him over. His eyes were closed, his skin a pale, waxy grey under the bronze. His chest was soaked. She tore open the frozen buckskin shirt. The wound was a raw, bloody mess on his left side, just under the ribs. It was puckered, ugly, a bullet wound. This wasn't a hunting accident. Someone had shot him. A white man, by the looks of the hole. "Well, you just found the devil's own crossroads, Eliza," she muttered. If she helped him, she was a traitor. If the army found out, they'd burn her cabin. If his tribe found her with him, they might kill her anyway, thinking she shot him. And if the man who shot him came back? The thought sent a shiver down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. She looked up at the sky. 3, maybe 4 hours of light left. "All right, Lord," she said, grabbing the warrior under his arms. "If you meant for me to die, you could have just sent a blizzard. This feels personal." He was heavy, a dead weight. She put her back into it, her muscles screaming, and began to drag him. The 50 yards to her cabin felt like a mile. She fell twice, her lungs burning, her breath sobbing in her throat. With a final, desperate heave, she pulled him over the threshold and kicked the heavy wooden door shut, plunging the small cabin into the dim, smoky light of the dying embers in her hearth. He lay on her floor, a bleeding, dangerous piece of the wilderness she had tried so hard to keep at bay. She bolted the door. Eliza Jane Barlow, widow of Jacob Barlow, had just invited her enemy in from the cold. The silence outside was broken. It was no longer waiting. It was watching. For a moment, Eliza just stared at the man on her floor. He was an invasion. His presence desecrated the one place she felt safe. The smell of pine, smoke, and old grief that defined her home was now tainted by the metallic tang of his blood and the wet animal smell of his frozen leathers. He groaned, a low animal sound of pure agony. "Get on with it, woman." She flew into a flurry of motion. First, the fire. She threw 3 precious logs onto the embers, coaxing them into a roaring blaze. Heat was life. Next, water. She broke the ice in her water barrel with a hatchet and set a kettle to boil. Then, the wound. She knelt beside him, her practical, no-nonsense nature taking over. She couldn't get his frozen buckskin shirt off. She took Jacob's skinning knife from the mantel, the one she now used for rabbits, and cut the shirt from his body. The cold air hit his skin. He shivered violently, his eyes fluttering open. They were black, deep, and unfocused, glazed with fever. He saw her, a white, blurry shape, and tried to snarl, a movement that cost him. He cried out and arched his back, a spasm of pure pain. "Hold still," she commanded, her voice rough. "You move, you die. You understand me? Hold still." He didn't understand the words, but the tone was universal. He slumped back, his jaw clenched. The wound was bad. The bullet had gone in the side, but she couldn't tell if it had come out. It was a ragged, dark hole, the flesh around it already turning an angry, purplish red. She took a deep breath. She'd tended Jacob's injuries from ranching, stitched up her own hand after a mishap with an axe. This was different. This was beyond her. "Well, Lord, I got him this far. The rest is on you," she muttered. She took the bottle of carbolic acid Jacob had kept for the livestock, her hands shaking. She'd use it to clean the wound. Then she'd have to probe for the bullet. She ripped a strip from one of her last good linen sheets. She looked at the man's face. He was conscious, barely, watching her with a hateful, burning intensity. "This is going to hurt," she said. "More than it already does. I'm sorry for it." She poured the carbolic. He didn't scream. He roared. It was a deep, guttural sound that seemed to shake the very logs of the cabin. His body went rigid, his hands clawing at the floorboards. But he didn't fight her. He took the pain, swallowed it, and let it fuel the fire in his eyes. Eliza's respect for him grew, sharp and unwanted. The kettle whistled. She took the boiling water and Jacob's long-nosed pliers, the ones he used for mending harnesses, and dropped them in to sterilize. "My name is Eliza," she said, mostly to herself. "I'm the woman who's either saving your life or ending it. Can't quite tell which." She took the hot pliers and her knife. "You need to bite on something." She grabbed a leather strap from the wall. "Here." He looked at the strap, then at her, with sheer contempt. He spat on the floor. "Suit yourself," she shrugged. "Don't say I didn't warn you." She probed the wound. His body seized. A low growl rumbled in his chest, but he didn't make a sound. His eyes were locked on hers, a silent, furious challenge. Eliza felt sweat bead on her forehead, though the cabin was still cold. The bullet was deep. She felt the metal scrape against bone. "Rib. He's lucky." "Almost," she whispered. She gripped the lead and pulled. This time he couldn't stop the sound. It was a choked, strangled cry as he passed out, his head lolling to the side. "Thank God for that," Eliza breathed, dropping the bloody, misshapen piece of lead into a bowl. It was .44 caliber, heavy lead. She looked at the man who'd fired it. This wasn't a long-range shot. This was close. This was personal. She worked for the next hour. She cleaned the wound again, packed it with the last of her yarrow and comfrey, herbs her grandmother had taught her to use, and bound it tightly with more strips of her precious sheet. His breathing was shallow, his skin burning. The fever was setting in, and it would be a hard one. She managed to get him out of his soaked pants and moccasins, averting her eyes. She was a widow, not a saint, but this felt like a violation. She wrapped him in Jacob's heaviest wool blanket, and, with a strength she didn't know she possessed, dragged him onto her own cot by the fire. She would take the floor. As she moved his things, a small leather pouch fell from his belt. It was tied with a rawhide string. Inside there was a single object, a small, intricately carved piece of soapstone. A hawk, its wings spread. She closed the pouch, her fingers lingering on the smooth stone. This wasn't just an Indian. This was a person, a man with a name, a family, a totem. She sat in her rocking chair, the Winchester across her lap, and watched the man on her cot. The blizzard outside picked up, the wind howling around the eaves, a mournful, lonely sound. The cabin was a tiny, fragile bubble of warmth and light in an ocean of icy darkness, and she had invited a shark inside. He moaned, his head thrashing on the pillow. He was speaking in a language she didn't understand. It was fast, guttural, and filled with pain. "8! 8!" he cried out, over and over. Eliza didn't sleep. She sat and listened to the storm, the fevered ramblings of her enemy, and the ticking of the clock that now seemed to be counting down to a day of reckoning. She had made a bargain. She had traded her safety for this man's life. And she had a terrible, sinking feeling that the devil would be coming to collect his due very soon. Day 2 dawned grey and mean. The blizzard had passed, leaving behind a world so white it hurt the eyes. The snow was piled in 6-foot drifts against the cabin, and the windows were opaque with frost. Eliza felt like she'd been awake for a year. She'd spent the night adding logs to the fire and spooning sips of lukewarm water past the warrior's cracked lips. His fever was a raging fire. Sometime before dawn, he'd gone quiet, his breathing so shallow she'd had to put her hand over his mouth to feel the wisp of air. But he was alive. She rose from her chair, her back screaming in protest. She made coffee, thin, bitter, and strictly rationed, and ate a piece of hardtack. As she sat, the man on the cot stirred. His eyes opened. This time they were clear. The fever was still there, but the delirium was gone. He was lucid, and he was terrified. He saw her, and his entire body sensed. He tried to sit up, his hand flying to his hip for the knife that wasn't there. The movement pulled at his stitches, and his face went pale, his breath hissing through his teeth. Eliza raised her hands, palms out. "Easy," she said, her voice low. "Easy, I'm not hurt. No hurt." She pointed at his bandage. "You were hurt. In the snow, I brought you here." He stared at her. His eyes were black, intelligent, and filled with a profound, suspicious distrust. He scanned the cabin, her rifle by the door, the bare shelves, the single cot. He was a warrior, and he was cataloguing threats. He was weak, but he wasn't broken. Eliza dipped a ladle into the pot of thin broth she'd been simmering. It was more rabbit bone than meat. She held the cup out. He just stared at it. "Water," she said. "Broth. Good." He didn't move. He wouldn't take anything from her hand. "He thinks I'll poison him," she realized. She sighed, took a sip from the cup herself, and then set it down on the floor, halfway between them. She went back to her chair. The silence returned, but this time it was different. It was charged, analytical. They sat like that for an hour, the man on the cot watching her, Eliza, pretending to mend a sock, watching him from the corner of her eye. Finally, his thirst won. He slowly, painfully, leaned over and picked up the cup. He sniffed it, his gaze never leaving her. Then he drank, fast and greedy, like an animal. He finished, wiped his mouth with the back of his hand, and spoke. His voice was a dry, ragged croak. "Why?" Eliza looked up, surprised. He spoke English, broken but clear. "You were dying," she said simply. "I am Lakota. I noticed." "You are white," he said, the word an accusation. "I noticed that too," Eliza said, her voice dry. A flicker of something. Surprise? Humor crossed his face. "My people. Your people. We are at war." "Your people didn't shoot you," Eliza said, standing up. "That was a .44 caliber bullet, fired from a Winchester or maybe a Colt revolver. One of my people did that." His eyes narrowed. "He is a bad man. He has dead eyes." "You know his name?" Eliza asked, her heart thumping. "No, he found me. My horse. A good horse. He wanted it. So he shot you for it." Eliza's stomach turned. That was the law of the wilderness. Simple, brutal theft. "I am Kangi," the warrior said, his head held high, though it cost him. "Kangi," Eliza repeated. "It means crow." He nodded, impressed. "You know our words." "A little," she lied. She'd heard the soldiers use it. "I am Eliza." "Eliza," he tested the name. "You help me." "Why?" Eliza walked to the window, scraping a small patch of frost away with her fingernail. "I'm a widow, Kangi. My husband, Jacob, he was killed by Cheyenne. I have every reason in the world to hate you. And when I found you, I almost left you. I wanted to." She turned to face him. "But I'm not a murderer. And I'm not my husband's ghost. I'm just a woman trying to survive, same as you." Kangi held her gaze. He was assessing her, not as a woman, not as a white person, but as a being. He gave a single, sharp nod. It was an acceptance, a truce. The rest of the day was quiet. He slept. Eliza bundled up and went out to clear the snow from her path and door, her rifle never leaving her side. She felt watched, but the forest was still. When she came back inside, Kangi was awake. He had pushed himself up against the headboard. He looked at her empty woodpile by the hearth. Then he looked at his bandaged side. A deep, profound shame crossed his features. He, a warrior, was being tended to by a woman, and he couldn't even provide her with firewood. "Do not," he grunted as she reached for her heavy axe. "You will stay put," Eliza said, "or you will tear your stitches, and all my work will be for nothing. I've been chopping my own wood for 4 months, Kangi. I think I can manage." She left the cabin, the heavy thwack of her axe striking the seasoned pine rounds, echoing in the clearing. It was hard work, and it warmed her. It also made her careless. She was so focused on the wood, she didn't see the tracks at first. They were by the tree line, nearly hidden. Not Kangi's moccasins. Boot tracks. Someone had been here, recently. Since the blizzard stopped. Someone had stood right there, in the cover of the pines, and watched her. Watched the cabin? Eliza's blood turned to ice. She dropped the axe and ran to the spot. The snow was churned. Near a pine trunk, half hidden, was a glint of brass. She dug it out with a numb finger. It was a single, dropped cartridge, 44-40. She knew this cartridge. She knew the man who used it. Every trapper and settler in the territory had their preference. This one, with the little dent on the primer from being loaded and unloaded, belonged to one man. Silas Croft, a trapper who lived on the other side of the ridge. A man with a friendly smile, a hearty laugh, and the coldest, deadest eyes Eliza had ever seen. The man who checked on the widow, more often than he needed to. The man who Kangi had said had dead eyes. He hadn't been checking on her. He'd been tracking Kangi. He'd tracked him to her clearing, and he had stood right here, watching, waiting. He knew. Eliza staggered back into the cabin, her arms laden with firewood. She dumped the logs by the hearth with a clatter that made Kangi jump. "You are afraid," he said. It wasn't a question. Eliza fought to control her breathing. She couldn't show him the cartridge. She couldn't tell him. His fever was down, but he was far from healed. Fear was an infection, and she wouldn't be the one to give it to him. "The wood is heavy," she lied, her back to him, as she fussed with the fire. "The man with the dead eyes," Kangi said, his voice flat. "He was here." Eliza froze, the poker in her hand. She turned slowly. "You saw him?" "I smell," Kangi said. "He was close. Tobacco. The bad kind." Silas Croft. He chewed a foul-smelling plug. Eliza dropped the poker. "He was here," she admitted, her voice a whisper. "He left tracks. And this." She opened her palm and showed him the brass cartridge. Kangi's face, already pale, lost all its color. "He knows. He knows I am here." "He knows someone is here," Eliza corrected, trying to sound braver than she felt. "He saw the smoke. He checks on me, sometimes. He checks on you." Kangi's eyes were sharp. He understood the nuance. Silas Croft wasn't a neighbor. He was a predator, circling, and she was a lone woman, a prize just like Kangi's horse. "He's a problem I've been managing," Eliza said stiffly. "He is the Wahmakashka," Kangi whispered. "The parasite." A new, terrible understanding passed between them. They weren't just a white woman and a Lakota man. They were two prey animals, trapped in the same burrow, while the fox sniffed at the door. Night fell. The second night. The wind had died, and the silence that returned was heavier, more profound. Every crackle of the fire, every groan of the settling logs, sounded like a footstep. Kangi's fever, agitated by the news, began to climb again. He fell into a restless, muttering sleep. Eliza sat in her rocker, the Winchester across her lap. She hadn't slept in 2 days. Her eyes burned, and her mind played tricks on her. The shadows in the corners of the cabin seemed to lengthen and writhe. She thought of Jacob. This cabin was his dream. We'll build a life, Eliza Jane. A real life, away from the filth of the cities. He'd been a good man, a kind man. But he was a dreamer. He hadn't understood the savagery of this land. He hadn't been built for it. But I am, she thought, her hand tightening on the rifle stock. I'm still here. This cabin was no longer a dream. It was a tomb she refused to be buried in. And then it came. Knock, knock, knock. 3 heavy, confident raps on her door. Kangi's eyes snapped open. He was instantly, silently awake. He reached for his non-existent knife. Eliza put a finger to her lips. She didn't move. Eliza Jane, you in there, girl? The voice was deep, laced with a false, syrupy friendliness. Silas Croft. I see your smoke. Mighty late to be up, ain't it? Just checking on you, with the snow being so bad. Kangi looked at Eliza. His eyes were burning. Do not open it. Eliza knew better. A lone woman who didn't answer a knock in the night. That was an invitation. It meant she was either dead or weak. She had to answer. Kangi, she whispered, her voice sharp. The root cellar. Now. She pointed to the trap door in the floor, hidden under a bear-skin rug. I am no coward, he hissed, trying to sit up. You're a target, she shot back. And you're in my home. You'll do as I say. Go, or he kills us both. The logic was undeniable. Gritting his teeth against the pain, Kangi swung his legs over the cot. He nearly collapsed. Eliza grabbed him, her shoulder under his arm, and half dragged, half carried him the 5 feet to the rug. She pulled it back, lifted the heavy door. The cellar was a black, spider-filled hole, smelling of damp earth and rotting potatoes. In, she commanded. He lowered himself in, his face a mask of humiliation and pain. If he... Kangi started. He won't, Eliza said. Be silent. She closed the door, kicked the rug back over it, and smoothed it with her foot. Knock, knock, knock. Eliza, open this door or I'm coming in. Might be you're hurt. I'm coming, Mr. Croft. Hold your horses, Eliza yelled, intentionally making her voice sleepy and irritated. She unbarred the door and opened it a crack, keeping her body behind it. Silas Croft stood on her porch, a hulking silhouette against the moonlight on the snow. He was a big man, his buffalo hide coat making him seem even larger. He held a lantern in one hand and a rifle in the other. His beard was frosted, and his eyes... Kangi was right. They were dead, like 2 chips of blue ice. Evening, Eliza Jane. He smiled. The smile didn't touch his eyes. Took you long enough. Had me worried. I was asleep, Mr. Croft. What do you want? Just checking. This winter, it's hard on folks, especially a woman alone. He leaned in, sniffing the air. Smells different in here. You got company? I've got a cold, Eliza snapped, and I'm burning a comfrey poultice for it. It stinks. Now if you'll excuse me. She tried to close the door. His boot stopped it. Now that ain't neighborly, he chided, pushing the door open and stepping inside, past her. He was in. Eliza's heart was a trapped bird in her chest. Croft scanned the cabin. He saw the single cot, the empty chair. Mighty cozy. His eyes lingered on the cot. You changed your bedding. It's my winter blanket, Eliza said, her voice shaking slightly. Damn it. Uh-huh. He walked over to the fire. Heard a story in town. Soldiers from Laramie are saying a buck from Charging Hawk's band went missing. Rogue, they say. Stole a horse. Eliza said nothing. She just willed her heart to stop pounding so loud. Could he hear it? Could he hear it from the cellar? But I heard something different, Croft said, turning to her, his voice low and conspiratorial. I heard he was found by a trapper, but the buck was wily. Shot the trapper's horse, got away. Badly wounded, though. He was telling her a story, his story. That's terrible, Eliza said. It is, Croft agreed. He ran a dirty finger along her mantle. Now that trapper, he'd be mighty obliged if someone found his property. There's a bounty on any Lakota buck, dead or alive. But this one's special. The trapper wants the kill himself. He looked straight at her. You ain't seen no strays, have you, Eliza? No one? Limpin' by? I haven't seen anyone in months, Mr. Croft. You know that. Right. He didn't believe her. He walked toward the door. Well, you keep that door barred. These are dangerous times. He paused, his hand on the latch. And you're low on wood. I'll come by tomorrow. Help you chop some. It wasn't an offer. It was a threat. I'll be back, and I'll search this place top to bottom. Good night, Mr. Croft. Good night, Eliza Jane. He left. She bolted the door, leaning her full weight against it, her knees trembling. She waited until the crunch of his snowshoes faded completely. She ripped the rug back and threw open the trapdoor. Kangi was coiled in the darkness, her skinning knife in his hand. He must have grabbed it on the way. He looked at her, his eyes blazing in the dark. He is Yutan, Kangi whispered, a word of pure venom. He who defiles. He's Silas Croft, Eliza said, helping him out. He was cold, trembling, and he'll be back by sunrise. The first weak light of the third day crept into the cabin, painting the frosted windows a sickly, pale blue. The long night had been a vigil. Neither Eliza nor Kangi had slept. Kangi sat on the cot, his back ramrod straight despite the pain. The visit from Croft, the humiliation of the cellar, and the imminent threat had worked a strange magic. The fever was gone, burned away by pure, cold adrenaline. He was weak, but the warrior was back. Eliza was cleaning her rifle. Again. The repetitive mechanical motion was the only thing keeping her hands from shaking. Wipe, oil, load, check the action. Wipe, oil, load. He shot me, Kangi said, breaking the long silence. Eliza looked up. It was not for my horse, Kangi continued, his eyes fixed on the fire. I was trekking. He was in the Pahasapa. The Black Hills, Eliza murmured. Our sacred land. He was trapping. Where he should not be. He had dead animals. Many. Mina. Mine. Winter white. Their pelts are worth much. He's a poacher, Eliza said, trapping on Lakota land. He saw me. I saw him. He smiled and raised his rifle. He did not speak. He just shot. Kangi touched his side. My horse. Startled. I fell. I ran. He followed. Until the storm. Now Eliza understood. This wasn't a chance encounter. Croft had shot Kangi in cold blood to cover his own crimes. And now, Kangi was a witness who could bring the whole U.S. Army down on him for illegal trapping in the protected territory. He doesn't just want you dead, Kangi, Eliza said, slotting a cartridge into the Winchester. He needs you dead. And you, Kangi said, looking at her. He will not let you be. The unspoken truth hung in the air. Croft wouldn't just kill her. He was the kind of man who would take his time. The checking on the widow was a lie, he told himself, and her, to cover the simple, ugly fact that he wanted her, and her land. And Silas Croft, took what he wanted. "He will come at sun-up," Kangi stated. "He is a coward. He will shoot from the trees." "He'll try to smoke us out," Eliza agreed, her mind racing. "He'll set the cabin on fire." A wave of despair washed over her. It was 2 against 1, but one was an invalid, and the other was just her. Croft was a killer. He had the advantage. They were trapped. "I will not die in a hole," Kangi said, reading her thoughts. He grabbed the side of the cot and, with a low grunt of pain, pulled himself to his feet. He swayed, but he stood. He was a pitiful sight. Barefoot, clad only in her late husband's oversized trousers and the bandages. But his eyes were on fire. He was a Lakota warrior, and he would meet his end standing. He walked to the door, picked up Jacob's old hunting spear, a thing that was more decoration than weapon, and tested its weight. "No," Eliza said. "Not yet." Kangi looked out the small, frosted window, scraping a patch clear. He stared at the ridge line, now golden with the first rays of sun. "He is coming," Kangi said. "The man with dead eyes." He paused, his body tensing. "And my people, they are coming." Eliza's blood ran cold. "What? How? How do you know?" "Last night," Kangi said, "in the cellar, I prayed. Not to your god, to Wakantanka. I left a sign. This morning, the snow." He trailed off. "They were looking. Now they follow." "Follow who?" Eliza whispered, afraid of the answer. "Croft or us?" "They follow the sign," Kangi said. "They are here." Eliza ran to the window, pushing him aside. She looked. At first she saw nothing, just the trees, the snow. And then the forest moved. They weren't on the ridge with Croft. They were everywhere. A shadow detached itself from a pine tree. Another rose from a snowdrift. One by one they appeared, on horseback, on foot, silent. They didn't ride in, whooping and screaming like in the dime novels. They simply materialized. Warriors, dozens of them. Their faces were painted, their breath plumed in the cold. They held lances, bows, and a few had old trade rifles. They formed a perfect, silent circle around her cabin. They had not seen Croft. They were not looking at the ridge. They were all looking at one place, her front door. "Kangi," Eliza whispered, her voice choking. They're not here for Croft." Kangi looked at the warriors. He saw their expressions. He saw the set of their jaws. "They are here," he said, his voice heavy with a terrible new understanding. "For me." His tribe hadn't come to rescue him. They had come to find him, and they had found him in the cabin of a white woman, a woman who, to their eyes, was his captor or his killer. The third day had dawned, and Silas Croft was no longer their biggest problem. The clearing was so quiet, Eliza could hear the creak of cold leather and the soft snort of a nervous horse. The circle of warriors was complete. They were a living, breathing wall of judgment, sealing her in. Kangi gripped the spear. "Do not show fear," he breathed. "They smell it." "A little late for that," Eliza whispered, her knuckles white on her rifle. One warrior, larger than the rest, dismounted. He was older, his face a map of old battles and hard winters. A magnificent, full eagle feather war bonnet rested on his head, and his buckskin shirt was heavily beaded. He carried no rifle, only a long, fur-wrapped lance. This was a man of great authority. He walked to the center of the clearing and struck the butt of his lance on the frozen earth. The thud was a command. He shouted, a long, guttural string of Lakota. It was not a question. It was an accusation. Inside the cabin, Kangi flinched. "What did he say?" Eliza asked. "He calls for the White Witch, who holds his son. He is charging Hawk. Your father?" 8, Kangi murmured, the word she'd heard in his fever. Father. Well, you'd better go talk to him, Eliza said, her voice frantic. Tell him I saved you. He will not believe, Kangi said. He sees this. He motioned to the cabin, to her, to the rifle in her hand. He sees a trap. He sees his son taken. He is proud, and he is grieving. Another warrior, younger and leaner, rode his horse forward. He had a cruel mouth and restless eyes. He knocked an arrow and pointed it at the cabin door. He yelled something. That is 2 moons, Kangi said, his voice tight with dislike. He is quick to anger. He says, burn the cabin. Smoke us out. That's his solution for everything, isn't it? Eliza muttered, her panic turning to a hot, reckless anger. Fine. You stay here. You're the proof. What? Are you? Before Kangi could stop her, Eliza unbarred the door and stepped out onto the porch. A collective gasp went up from the circle. Horses shied. The warrior, 2 moons, drew his bowstring taut. Eliza Jane Barlow stood alone on her porch, her auburn hair unbound, looking like fire against the white snow. She held her Winchester, but she deliberately, slowly, pointed the barrel at the ground. She looked at Charging Hawk. She was terrified, but she would not bow. I am Eliza Barlow, she said, her voice shaking but carrying in the cold air. This is my home. Charging Hawk stared at her, his expression unreadable. He spoke, this time in slow, halting English. You have my son. He is in my home, Eliza corrected. He is safe. Safe! 2 moons spat the word. He pointed at her. She lies. She is Wasichu. She shot him. She holds him. For bounty. A low, dangerous murmur went through the warriors. This they understood. This they had seen before. No, Eliza shouted. I did not shoot him. I found him. In the snow. He was dying. Lies. 2 moons aimed his arrow. Wait. The cabin door opened. Kangi staggered out, holding the doorframe for support. He was pale, shaking, and wearing a white man's trousers. But he was alive. Charging Hawk's iron mask of a face broke. For 1 second, pure, unadulterated relief flooded his eyes. My son! Kangi raised his hand. He spoke, his voice weak but carrying. He spoke in Lakota, a fast, urgent torrent of words. He pointed to his bandaged side. He pointed to Eliza. He pointed to the root cellar. He spoke of the fever, of the broth. As he spoke, the tension in the clearing shifted. 2 moons lowered his bow, a look of confusion on his face. Charging Hawk listened, his gaze fixed on his son. Kangi was finishing, his voice growing stronger. He pointed to the trees, to the ridge line. He said the name, Silas Croft. The warriors knew the name. A new, darker anger began to build, and then Kangi did something Eliza didn't expect. He turned to her, and in front of his father, his tribe, he gave her the Lakota sign for courage, a fist held over the heart. Charging Hawk looked at Eliza. He was about to speak. He was about to pass judgment, to decide her fate. The alliance was almost forged. Crack. A single rifle shot shattered the world. It wasn't a trade musket. It was the high-powered, flat crack of a modern repeater. The bullet kicked up a plume of snow not 3 feet from Charging Hawk's feet. Every warrior whirled. Their attention snapped from the cabin to the ridgeline, 300 yards distant. A puff of white smoke. Silas Croft. He'd arrived. He'd seen the powwow in the clearing. He'd seen his prey standing. He'd seen the white woman he coveted. And in his twisted, hateful mind, he'd seen only one thing, a nest of traitors. He was going to clean up the mess himself. Into the cabin! Eliza screamed, grabbing Kangi. But the warriors didn't run. They exploded. Half the warriors, 2 moons among them, kicked their horses and charged toward the ridge, fanning out, using the trees for cover. The other half, Charging Hawk included, took cover behind the cabin, using it as a bulwark. Crack! Another shot from Croft. A warrior's horse screamed and went down, pinning its rider. Thwack! An arrow from 2 moons, fired from a running horse, sailed 200 yards and embedded itself in the tree trunk near Croft's position. "He has a high place," Kangi said, bracing himself against the cabin wall next to his father. "His rifle is strong," Charging Hawk said, watching the ridge. "He's a dead shot," Eliza said, her mind racing, "and he'll pick you off, one by one. He's got the range." The warriors on the field were pinned down. Croft was too far for their bows or old muskets. They were a charging, angry, easy target. Kangi looked at Eliza. His eyes were desperate. "He will kill them." Eliza looked at the men who, 5 minutes ago, were ready to kill her. She looked at Charging Hawk, a father who had just gotten his son back. She looked at the ridge, where the man who was the real monster was reloading. "His rifle shoots far," Eliza said, a sudden cold clarity settling over her. She turned, ran back into the cabin, and ignored the Winchester. She went to the heavy wooden chest at the foot of her cot. She threw it open. She pulled out Jacob's other rifle. It was a Sharps model 1874, a .50 caliber Big 50, a buffalo gun. It was impossibly heavy, its barrel over 3 feet long. Jacob had bought it to hunt buffalo, but he'd never had the heart to use it. It had sat, oiled and unused, for 2 years. Eliza, however, had practiced. She grabbed a handful of the long, heavy cartridges. She ran back out. Kangi and Charging Hawk stared at the gun. It was a cannon. "He is 300 yards, Kangi said. "This," Eliza said, grunting as she rested the heavy barrel on the corner of the cabin's porch rail, "shoots 800. She was exposed. She was a clear target. But she knew Croft. He was focused on the charging warriors. He hadn't seen her. She set the rear sight, 300 yards. She laid her cheek against the cold, smooth wood of the stock. "Breathe out," she whispered, an old memory of Jacob's voice. "Squeeze, don't pull." She found him, a flash of his buffalo coat in the V-sight. She breathed out and squeezed. The boom of the Sharps was not a crack. It was a physical event, a rolling thunder that slammed the air and echoed back from the ridge. The recoil punched Eliza's shoulder, hard, almost knocking her off her feet. In the clearing, all motion stopped. The charging warriors, the men by the cabin, everyone. They all looked at the ridge. For a second, nothing. Then, a dark shape, the buffalo coat, pitched forward from the rocks. It didn't just fall, it tumbled, a boneless, rag-doll spiral down the snowy incline, leaving a dark smear. It came to rest, face down and unmoving, in a drift. The silence that followed was more profound, more absolute than any that had come before. 2 moons, 50 yards away, reined in his horse. He stared at the body, then at the wisp of white smoke rising from the barrel of Eliza's rifle. Eliza herself was trembling, the heavy gun threatening to slip from her grasp. The smell of sulfur and burnt powder filled her nostrils. She had just taken a life. She had killed a man. And the world was still. Slowly, Charging Hawk stood up from behind the cabin. He walked, not to the ridge, not to his son, but to her. He stopped 3 feet away. His eyes, ancient and dark, raked over her. They went from her shaking hands to the massive rifle to her face. He was looking for something. Fear. Bloodlust. Remorse? Eliza just stood, meeting his gaze. She was too tired to be anything but what she was. He turned and shouted an order. 2 warriors dismounted and ran to the man whose horse had been shot. They were pulling him free. He was alive. The other warriors, The ones who had charged now walked their horses back to the clearing. They formed a loose semicircle, their eyes on Eliza. The hostility was gone. In its place was a deep, unsettling awe. Kangi limped over to his father. He stood beside him, and together the two most powerful men of their band looked at the small, pale white woman. "You have," Charging Hawk began, searching for the English, "a strong arm." "You have Wakan," Kangi whispered, his eyes on the sharps. "Spirit, magic." Eliza finally lowered the rifle, its weight too much. "He was a bad man," she said, her voice hoarse. "He shot your son. He was my enemy too." Charging Hawk nodded. This, he understood, the alliance of shared enemies. It was a bond as old as the hills. He turned and spoke to his men. One of them, a younger man, dismounted and untied a heavy, rolled bundle from behind his saddle. He brought it and laid it at Eliza's feet. "For the PTI," Charging Hawk said. Eliza looked confused. "Buffalo," Kangi translated. "A winter hide, tanned by our best women. It is warm." It was a gift of immense value, a peace offering, a payment. No, not a payment, an acknowledgement. Charging Hawk put his hand on Kangi's good shoulder. "We go, now. The soldier coats. They hear this." He pointed at the Sharp's rifle. "They come." He was right. That shot would bring patrols from miles around. A horse was brought for Kangi. He was helped into the saddle, his face tight with pain. He looked down at Eliza. There was so much to say. "Thank you. I'm sorry. I will not forget this." But the words were too big and too dangerous. Instead, he just looked at her. And in his eyes, Eliza saw something she hadn't seen in a long time. She saw a flicker of her own humanity reflected back. "Eliza," he said. The way he said her name, it was a prayer and a promise. "Go," she said. "Get well, Kangi." Charging Hawk raised his hand, and as silently as they had appeared, the Lakota tribe melted back into the trees. They did not look back. They took their son, their wounded, and left the body of Silas Croft for the wolves. Eliza Jane Barlow stood alone in the clearing. The silence returned. But it was different. Her cabin was no longer a prison. The snow was no longer a shroud. It was just her home. She looked at the buffalo hide at her feet. She looked at the blood stain on the ridge, a tiny, dark speck in the distance. She picked up the heavy hide, dragged it inside, and bolted the door. She was alone. But for the first time in a very long time, she was not afraid. Eliza Jane Barlow survived the winter. The soldiers came, drawn by the sound of the shot, but they found nothing but a widow, a warm cabin, and a story about a wolf she'd scared off with a buffalo gun. They never found Silas Croft's body, but the silence of the high plains was changed for her. It was no longer empty. It was filled with the memory of a choice to see a human being instead of an enemy. The story of the White Widow of the Black Hills and the warrior she saved was never written in a history book. It was whispered in the lodges of the Lakota and in the heart of a woman who learned that courage isn't about not being afraid. It's about seeing the world clearly and choosing to act. She proved that in a land of blood and ice, the most dangerous and powerful thing wasn't a rifle. It was an act of mercy. Thank you for listening to this story from the Untamed West. If this story of survival, drama, and impossible choices kept you on the edge of your seat, help us keep these legends alive. Please hit that like button, share this story with someone who loves the raw history of the frontier, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel and click the bell. You won't want to miss the next tale we pull from the dust and snow. Until next time, stay brave, and thanks for watching.